Okay.
Okay, great. Well, this is the Community and Economic Development Committee. It is Thursday, November 3rd at 11 a.m. And we'll start out with some introductions. I'm the chair, Pete Peterson, and my vice chair is
Kevin Cross.
And other members that are present, Mr. Rivera,
I'm here, present.
Mr. Swilt,
Salt, Randy Salt here.
Salt, and Jamie Allard.
Okay.
I'm here. Thank you, Pete.
Okay, and Mr. Constant.
I'm here.
Okay.
Great.
I'm just making a note of, I have that list in front of me, so.
Okay, gang's all here. So let's get into new business. The first item we have is Block 102 development presentation. Who's here to make that presentation? Is that Mr. Robbins?
Yes, Mr. Peterson, I can do that. Do I need to share my screen with you guys, or is that something you'll do on your end?
You could share it if you want, or maybe Mandy has it that she could share, whatever works.
I could certainly share my screen. There's no problem at all.
You there, Dennis?
Go ahead then.
Okay,
Oh, it's another call. Yeah, it's another call. No, you're good.
seconds. Open the share tray. Sorry, guys. Oh.
There we go.
Okay, I think I got it on there. It's only Zoom meeting number 2000. I should have this figured out by now. I apologize for being slow. So I think, is it showing you is it the whole screen, my full screen? We want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah, there's a full screen up here.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure it didn't have all the little note slides at the side. So I just wanted, our purpose in coming to see you today is that we just wanted to update you and introduce this project. We are still in the process of course, working through all of the particulars with legal and with Heritage Land Bank, and we're not in any way asking for any kind of action from you today. We're just this is just an update. We want to make sure that you're aware of something that the Anchorage Community Development Authority is working on. And as the particulars get firmed up over the next couple of months, we will, of course, be coming back and sharing it with you and asking for some specific action. So we are proposing development at Block 102, and this is just some of the code that goes along with that talks about how we can affect the land trade that we're anticipating between the state and the city. And then there's another page here that talks about the historical that's happening in the past, that this isn't the first time that we've worked together for the good of the city between HLB and ACDA. We've got a history of working together on things. And then this project is something that's consistent with our downtown plan. It was actually specifically mentioned in our downtown plan, and it is a priority, meets the priorities that were outlined by the Roger Brooks assessment, which talks about less surface parking in downtown. And this would take a big chunk of surface parking off the table and turn it into housing. It's not going to cost the taxpayers any real money. ACDA is, as you know, we're an authority of the municipality, and most of the money that will be used for this will come from the money that we generate out of our budget. This is going to help the taxpayer, of course it is, because it's going to take a piece of property right now that's not on the tax rolls. And in addition to meeting the goals of the downtown plan of Roger Brooks, it's going to build a multi-million-dollar development, and it's going to create tax dollars, real estate tax as well as MISA tax from us. So it's going to help the taxpayer by spreading that tax burden out on the tax cap. And then the timeline, because I get asked this a lot, so I would just like to talk about it. Once we work out the details with legal and HLB and we get everything moving, we of course will come to the assembly and ask for your blessing. And then the timeline is we'd like to be an RFP to find the developer sometime next year. It would be great if we could do that in the summer, but again, the timeline will be determined by, of course, the assembly's approval and getting all the details worked out with everybody, all of the players involved. This is Block 102. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, we just wanted to show some pictures. Block 102 is on it's 8th Avenue between 8th and 9th, D Street and E Street. So it's a very large chunk of real estate in a very developable and desirable part of the city. This is an aerial view of it. And so you can see in relationship to some of the other activity that ACDA has going on. If you travel up to the top of your screen, that's the downtown mall and the JCPenney garage. And plans are already underway. While no hard plans have been made, we are planning the redevelopment of the JCPenney garage at the other end of D Street. So this is kind of an end-to-end development for ACDA, and we've also received a block grant from Brownfield Block Grant to study a D Street redevelopment along there and create a true walking corridor in downtown from the park strip all the way to the mall. So we're pretty excited about that. This shows you the HLB parcel that we're contemplating a trade with the state. It's out off of Tudor. And again, details have to be worked out, but this is what we're proposing. And that is 10 acres of land that's between the crime lab and a DOT facility out there. That's an aerial view of the piece of land there. And then this is talks about the Brownfield grant funds assessment, where we've got both Brownfield grants already approved for this site downtown and also for the site out off of Tudor to get the environmental assessments done to make sure that there's no contamination in place. This is just a letter from the governor to Brian Butcher showing that he supports the trade. And then this is the page that talks about from the Our Downtown District Plan. We contemplate building, from between 140 and 180 housing units downtown on Block 102, along with some mixed use local retail. It's going to be include some parking. In fact, we just returned from Oklahoma City, and I wish I could find of all the pictures I took, we saw a development that we kind of envisioned that will look very similar to what Block 102 has done. It was really quite exciting. It included parking and a courtyard and retail and some excellent housing. So our goal is to develop Block 102 to help meet, again, the goals of the downtown plan. We would like to build housing. It helps us with housing downtown. And I think I just wanted to thank you guys for giving us a chance to present to the committee. We want to make sure that you're aware and that you know the things that we're working on, so that if there's a chance or you hear of any stakeholders that aren't being considered or that we're not talking to, we want to make sure that we do that. We have been blessed by the community council. The downtown community council has passed a resolution in support of it. The Anchorage Economic Development Council also passed a resolution in support of it. And now we're waiting on a resolution from the Campbell Creek Community Council. We presented to them last month, but they have a month wait before that project can be endorsed. So we're really excited about the possibilities, and we're looking forward to getting all the details worked out between, like I say, with HLB and legal and all the involved parties. But thank you for allowing us to present and sort of bring you up to speed on what we're doing.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Robbins. And if any committee members have questions, put yourself in the chat. And Mr. Constant.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I said this before at a meeting that I am supportive of the land trade between the state and the muni, the HLB, but I'm not convinced yet of handing it straight over to you at ACDA or ACDA, Mike. And it's not personal, but there's like a middleman in between both parties on the transaction. And so for me, I want to see a more fulsome proposal from ACDA before I can support the transfer of the land to ACDA. And I said that before. And so is there a path where we just make the transfer simple between the muni, HLB, and the state so that we can then get a proposal that I can chew on?
Chris, before Assemblymember Constant, excuse me, we did take your comments to heart the last time we talked about this, and before we make a proposal that we ask you for action on, we will have such a plan and a path for you to look at. I mean, so the answer to your question is that yes, before you're asked to take any action or make a decision about how the land trade is going to happen, you'll have a plan and you'll be able to understand exactly how that is. Again, we're not asking for any action today. I just wanted to give you simply an update that we're still working on the project and it's still on our primary, it's on the sort of the front burner of our radar at ACDA. But yes, to answer your question, that there is a path, and that's why we're working with HLB and legal, trying to make sure that everything is correct.
Thanks. And I would just offer it might be wise to have a two-pronged path available through legal. One being your proposed path and one being that's direct between HLB and the state that has a next step. And so just some prep might be wise to have both paths available.
That's good advice. Thank you.
All right. Well, I have a question. How many acres is this area that you're planning to build on? And so how many dwelling units per acre would it end up being? Did you know that off the top of your head, Mike?
Yeah, Jim, I'm gonna shift that question to Jim. He knows how big the parcel is, I think. Jim, you want to answer? We haven't set forth a design yet for approval, but in terms of I don't know we can answer the dwellings per acre, but we could certainly tell you how big that parcel is there on Block 102.
Yeah. So the parcel, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is almost 2 acres. Downtown city block is 2 acres, and so Block 102, the ownership is held by Alaska Housing Finance Corp. They own all but 2 city parcels in that block. So that's 14,000 square feet, 14,000 square feet less of 2 acres. So you can put quite a few residential units in there. I think it's a great opportunity for us to add some housing downtown and bring some people into the businesses downtown.
Again, we're contemplating between 140 and 180.
All right, great. Thanks. Additional questions from members of the committee? Not seeing any. Well, yes, keep us in the loop on this as this develops further along here. We can add this to our agenda and to stay updated on this as we move forward.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you allowing us some time on your agenda today.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Robbins. And let's move down to the next item on our agenda. And see, I don't have a copy of the agenda right with me here.
Airport zoning.
Airport zoning, there we go. Talking about consolidated zoning around the international airport, I believe.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Adam Trombley here. So I wanted to put this on the list because there's some history in regards to zoning. there's kind of split zones, and there's a lot of uncertainty in regards to what the airport zoning looks like. And I think it would be helpful if we started this discussion at this level, and then obviously work sessions and further on some past ordinances that had been worked on that kind of got stalled over time. But fortunately, Francis McLaughlin's here to help explain, because he actually worked on the ordinance from, I think, 2016. And so I'm going to turn it over to Francis. I think this would, I'll just stop at that. So Francis, can you speak to the airport zoning ordinance that the assembly members should have?
Sure. Thanks, Adam. Can everyone hear me okay?
Sure can.
Oh, cool. Well, so the West Anchorage District Plan that was adopted in 2014 said that all of the multiple zoning districts at Ted Stevens Airport should be consolidated into one airport zoning district. That's also stated in a reserve section in our land use regulations, our zoning regulations, Title 21. And then Anchorage 2040 said that as well. So Anchorage 2040 goal 10-1 says adopt an airport management zoning district that combines the multiple zoning districts at Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport. And the time frame of it was now. That was back in 2018. So, the airport is sort of will do rezoning into a airport zoning district per sort of the plans and things. I think what's been distributed is some of the background information, and I think the intent is to give the assembly some options. So on the one hand, the assembly could adopt a draft ordinance that would say that that Ted Stevens Airport is subject to their own FAA master plan. And if I share my screen, I can show that plan to you. Let's see here. So that's my email. Let me see if I can bring up. Okay, so the Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport master plan. They have a master plan. It's required that they do it for the federal government. My cursor is over here. There's a public involvement summary, but it sort of goes through, implementation of the plan. It's updated every 4 to 10 years. So it is a current plan. And the FAA and the federal government has sort of total control over everything that happens at the airport. And so this plan is required for the federal government, and there is a public outreach process. So one of the ordinances that has, I think, been distributed says that the airport would be subject to their own master plan. And then another sort of option in talking, well, I should say that one more point on this. If I share Seattle, SeaTac, city of SeaTac has the SeaTac International Airport, and this is what SeaTac does. So you're looking at the zoning map for the city of SeaTac, and the different colors show the different zoning districts, yellow being residential, red being commercial. I can't remember what the blue was, but the gray is the airport. And what the gray is in terms of regulations is this. There is an aviation operations area, and then there's an aviation commercial area. So the aviation operations area says that, hey, this is an airport, and behind airport security, these are, airplanes, runways, hangars, and fire departments, and security, and all of that. And within that aviation operation zone, things that are airport related are permitted by right. And then there's the areas outside of the security control line, and those are the aviation commercial areas. So your car rental areas, and those follow more traditional sort of zoning requirements about like landscaping and parking requirements and stuff. But those are things that you wouldn't want on an airstrip, like parking requirements or trees, birds are not good for airports and that sort of thing. So this is CTAX zoning regulations, and the AVO district, aviation operations district, all these aviation related things are permitted by right. So, and then the aviation commercial area, follows more traditional zoning. But so switching back to the zoning map. So that's just giving you an idea what another community does. And then I guess I would just sort of conclude with there was an effort a few years ago to adopt sort of a more complex airport management zoning district with quite a few different requirements built into it. And that ordinance stopped because of for various reasons. But so I think what Mr. Trombley was putting forward is the airport has been stuck in this inappropriate sort of zoning mismatch. They have residential zoning, they have public lands and institutions, they have industrial, they have TR, the transition district, which is like a holding district. So none of those zoning districts are really appropriate for an airport. Industrial district's probably the closest. But so one of the options is to adopt sort of a simple ordinance that would say that they're subject to their own master plan. Another path would be to adopt regulations that are a little bit more complicated and specific. And I can go into that ordinance as well. It looks a little bit more like Seattle's, where it's not referring to a master plan, but as much as saying that an aviation zone is everything aviation related is permitted by right. And there's more details about site development and design requirements. Yeah. Does that go answer some of, I guess, speak to what you were seeking, Mr. Trombley?
Yeah, it was. Thank you very much.
Cool.
And I have a question from Mr. Constant.
Probably a series of questions. So the state master planning process follows DOT's traditional public outreach process, right?
I don't know.
But I mean, we could make an assumption if DOT is running a public outreach process, it's going to generally be what DOT does.
I actually think, a member of the airport, this is not a dodge in the question, Mr. Condon, it's a good question. I think that there's a very involved, robust public outreach process that the airport does over the course of like several years in order to adopt their master plan. It has to meet FAA requirements, and the airport has their own planning department, and they follow FAA's requirements for the master plan. I don't think it's DOT, and I will say that for those 3 community councils that abut the Ted Stevens Airport, the airport planning department attends every single one of those community councils, all 3 of them.
Absolutely. I was there last night when one of them presented to the community council, and then when it came time for questions, it was cut off and there were no questions. So it feels very much like this would be handing off any local control that we might have to the Department of Transportation and their liaison with the federal government. So I certainly want to understand the mechanics of that before I would ever consider this one line that would completely cut the muni out. So another question that you might be able to answer, probably not though. You mentioned this CTAC methodology of things that are within the security bounds, one thing which is generally within their control. So could Ted Stevens just build a fence across the coastal trail in the lands that are, jointly owned or managed?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. The airport owns land that's outside of their security line, like Connors Bog and parts of the coastal trail. This zoning that we're proposing has no effect on those lands. I couldn't speak
Well-
to the legality of the coastal trail or of Connors Bog. I know that these are sticking points and issues. What I've heard commitments from the airport is that they have no interest at all in blocking the coastal trail and taking that away. But yeah, those are commitments that the zoning isn't meant to sort of try and fix some of those legal questions having to do. I mean, our current zoning doesn't offer any more protections than a new one would in terms of the coastal trail. But that's an important issue. But our zoning isn't intended to deal with that.
I can appreciate that, but it's more the principle of the idea. Again, if they just simply move the fence and we have a zone that says if it's within the fence, security, then it's theirs to do with as they deem fit. Then I perceive a real issue with this. And I have been in any number of negotiations with the Department of Transportation and Public Facilities in which they say one thing, and then once they have control, they do a completely other thing. And so my skepticism is high, in particular of this one line code proposal that hands over the reins completely to the state DOT and its master planning process, whatever that might be. The other idea I am interested in hearing more about, which is kind of streamlining and simplifying the zoning bounds and what's considered what, that makes sense. And it's command in the code from before, but I think a thoughtful, engaged process rather than a simple one line excision is more in line with where I would fall.
Fair. Thanks for the question, Mr. Constant. Yeah, in terms of the fence, I don't think they can just move the fence. I think that the security line is like a legal boundary that can't just be willy-nilly changed. But the airport would be better able to speak to that. My understanding is that, like with the Port of Anchorage, that the port security area or the airport security area is like a legal area, and they don't just sort of move that boundary. I know it's a part of the what the parts that I read of the airport master plan as well. That's an identified area that isn't easily changed, is my understanding. But it'd take the airport representatives to sort of speak to that. I've heard him speak about it, but it was years ago.
So is someone here online from the airport that would, is available to speak to that?
I don't believe there's anyone from the airport, Mr. Peterson.
Okay, all right, thanks, Mr. Trombley. Well, and my question is part of the reason that this zoning is coming up is because of the old National Guard base that the airport is in the process of being redeveloped since they moved on to J-Bear. Does that have anything to do with why this is taking place? Do you know that, Mr. McLaughlin?
Sorry, I was distracted. Can you repeat the question, Mr. Peterson? I apologize.
Okay, yeah, the National Guard base moved on to J-Bear here about 6 or 7 years ago. And so that area became available for development at the Anchorage International Airport. So I was thinking possibly one of the reasons for this zoning is because of that additional land that has been added to the airport. Is that true, or am I just
Thank you. I don't know. You said something about the military, and then this is just about Ted Stevens Airport. I don't know about any land that they're getting from the military.
Well, there used to be a National Guard base.
Oh, cool.
And then
Yeah.
that moved on to J-Bear, and so there became additional lands for the airport. So I was wondering if that was a reason why they decided they wanted to move forward with this rezone.
Well, the zoning, thank you. Yeah. So the zoning, this is in our West Anchorage District Plan and in Anchorage 2040. These are goals of this is needed for our community. The airport's a major facility. It's important to the vitality of our community. It's the third largest airline cargo airport in the world. All those things. It is related to Coulis in that the biggest area of industrial land that we have in our community is probably at the airport. So there are like logistics related businesses that are airports are competing around the world to get electric bikes, manufacturing or whatever in or different like trade zones and things at airports, and some of the available land is on the south side, the South Airport. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. Any additional questions from members of the committee? Well, and I was reading some of the questions that were put forward by members of some of the local community councils, and they were worried about additional traffic on some of the local streets and roads specifically, and so, I mean, I haven't been driving on Raspberry Road much in recent years, so I'm not familiar with how thick the traffic is on that street at this point, but there was talk that it might increase traffic enough need to expand the number of lanes on Raspberry, and so that was actually a little surprising to me that the development at the airport would increase traffic that much on Raspberry. I see someone has a hand up. I'm not sure who that is.
Mr. Peterson, Dave Whitfield, Planning Department.
Go ahead,
Thank you
Dave.
very much. I just want to point out, and I think Francis touched on this, and perhaps Mr. Constant recognizes it as well. But what's before you are two distinctly different ordinances, and what we intended to do today was present you with two options for consideration, understanding that at some point in time we need to address the issue of the airport and solving the problem of our airport zoning. So what you have here is one ordinance that's simplistic and says that the airport is subject to their own master plan. The second establishes a district for which the airport would have to conform to and comply with. That district establishes some rules that they have to develop under. So I think Francis touched on it, but I want to make it very clear that that what we have before you today are two options, and we just want you to consider either one. Thank you.
All right, great. It's always good to have options. There are questions or discussion from members of the committee.
Mr. Chair, I just would offer that the option that creates the district will at least keep our planning department working, because that's a big project. Long range planning, I should say. The other side is always.
All right, thank you, Mr. Constant. All right, not seeing any additional questions or comments on this item. I guess we can move down to the next item on our agenda. So it would be item C. Like I said, I should have printed out the agenda. We don't normally have this number of items on our agenda. So third-party review of fee reductions is the next item we have on the agenda.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to speak to that. Adam Trombley here.
Go ahead, Mr. Trombley.
Sure, and I don't have any handouts for you, but one of the things that, we've talked about is housing. How can we reduce some of those costs? I know, and again, this is a further discussion I need to have with the department, as well as, what does this do to the funds and stuff like, I think probably the Fund 163, other revenue that would be associated with development services. So this is just an initial conversation with the assembly, that this is something that I'm thinking about, and that there's no proposal on the table right now at all. But right now you have two options when you want to do single family or duplex. You can either go through and have your plan review done by the municipality, or you can go the third party route. The third party route allows you to go to an outside entity, but the fees for even when you go to the third party, you're still paying the same amount of permit review fee that you would be for doing it in-house as well. And so since the municipality isn't doing that permit review for that section that you've hired an outside contractor to do, we're looking at possibly reducing that fee, because a lot of contractors are now going to the third party review route, as opposed to having the municipality do it just for single family and duplex. And it's been successful. It was an ordinance that I actually wrote and passed over a decade ago, and it's been very, very effective. And so I just wanted to get it on your radar, so that if something does come forward, you're not surprised by it. But again, there's considerable amount more due diligence on my part that I need to do before something comes forward. But it's just chipping away at that housing cost, especially with rising interest rates. So that's all I wanted to say about it, but I'm happy to answer any questions if the committee has it.
Okay, are there questions from members of the committee about third-party fee reductions? Mr. Cross.
Well, I think there's also that the third-party review became so popular that so little business was going through development services that they lost an ISO designation. Is that my understanding? And maybe Mr. Whitfield, you can speak to this, but I think if they can reduce their fees and they can do more plan approvals, then they're required to review a certain amount of plans for certain designations. Is that an accurate statement?
Mr. Whitfield?
Well, I'm happy to respond to that. I'm not sure if Dave is still on, but because this would be a title, this would be a Title 23 thing. Dave deals solely with Title 21. I'm unaware of losing any ISO ratings, so I'm not entirely sure. But I can tell you that when this ordinance was developed, it was made very clear that not having municipality do plan review for single family duplex was not going to affect the ISO rating. In fact, anything outside the building safety service area, which is basically all of Chugach, Eagle River, Eklutna, Girdwood, was never doing that anyways. And so I can look into that, but that is certainly something that I've never heard of.
Okay. Any follow-up, Mr. Cross?
No, thank you. They had mentioned that they had lost their ISO because of this at another meet. I don't remember if it was a CDC meeting or at another building with the building department, but that's fine. I think the fee reduction is a step in the right direction. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Mr. Constant.
Thanks. I heard the same thing at another meeting, but maybe we'll be able to track that down. It's funny. I read the agenda item slightly differently. It reads to me third-party review of fee reductions, which suggests an idea of having the fee schedules reviewed by a third party and presenting to us a proposal for how we might make our fees more effective. And so it's just a thought. And this idea is what I'm understanding it is a review of reduction of fees for third-party review. It's really what we're talking about, right? It's like reducing fees for third-party review.
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Constant. That is correct. There's probably a typo in how I sent that to Mr. Peterson. Yes, this is solely discussing third-party review and the fee associated with third-party review, not having a third party come in and review all of our fee schedules.
Right, okay, and so good to know that that's the case. You know, this conversation about the building safety service area and how all of that works is one that is still percolating through the various municipal processes, and it's certainly going to be a conversation that comes forward in the next 6 months to a year. And so I'm definitely interested to see in writing the impacts of the shift of fees. What would happen? What's the fiscal note? You know, those kind of things. So we have a basis to have a conversation. I understand you're just introducing it. It's great to have it early in our minds. So definitely, I think the next step is, what does that mean?
Right, so having this on our agenda we have it on the radar, we're aware of it, and that sounds like what the goal was to put this on the agenda, if I'm following correctly. Is that right, Mr. Trombley?
I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson, you broke up there. Can you say that again?
Okay, I said, well, I think the reason that you put this on our agenda today is just so that we know it, so we'd have it on our radar and aware that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, fantastic. All right, any other questions or comments from members of the committee about fee reductions for third-party reviews? Not seeing any, I guess we can go to the next item on the agenda. Code changes, recommendations from the builders after our assembly retreat, which we had, that we were discussing how we could find ways to have additional housing built in the municipality of Anchorage. And is anyone here from the builders community that would that has a presentation to make for us about this?
Mr. Peterson, I did not ask anybody because I don't remember who I chatted with. I'm curious what if you guys kept notes at your retreat, and if you wouldn't mind sharing those notes with me as far as the recommendations for changes, because I'm happy to work in a collaborative manner to get some of those changes put into ordinance form and work that through AHBA and AGC and stuff like that. So this was just more informational as far as what you guys came up with, because I just hadn't seen anything yet.
There was a list put together that I remember receiving via email that I could certainly forward to you, Mr. Trombley, so that you could share that with the builders community. And I just saw a hand go up. Who's
It's Kevin Cross. I see Claire has. I have both notes, both the summary of it as well as the fantastic, well-detailed notes that Claire put together with individuals that had kind of spearheaded those. And I can email those off to Dave immediately, or Claire can. I'm sure she's got them. She's actually much more organized than me. She probably has them right there as well. But we'll make sure you get those, Dave.
And I was gonna say that I will email them to Mandy right now, or put them in the chat so that everyone can see them.
Okay, thanks. And that was Claire Ross. Yeah, that was we actually had quite a discussion at the retreat that day, and a number of subjects were discussed, and so it was actually probably quite a task to try to put a summary together from everything that transpired that was it 4 or 5 hours we were there that day. So
Can I say one more thing?
yep, go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, this is Claire Ross with Legislative Services with the Assembly. I am working to get a meeting with Mr. Trombley so we can kind of coordinate between the Assembly and the administration on this. And then I'm hoping to work with the Assembly more through some kind of strategic planning process to figure out which projects kind of align them on a schedule and see who's interested in working on what. So I am hoping to bring this before the Assembly some more as part of your strategic planning for 2023, and also working with the administration on it.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that's great. Yeah, anything that furthers communication between the administration and our department is got to be a good thing. So, thank you, Claire. Any other comments or questions about this item before we move to the next item on our agenda? Not seeing any. So the next item I have on the agenda is disposal of Heritage Land Bank land. And is there anyone, Mr. Trombley, is this something that you have a presentation for?
Not a presentation to share, but Emma with HLB is here. She's going to speak for about a minute or two on some HLB stuff. But the reason I wanted to address this topic was because we really have two forms of municipal owned land. We have MOA real estate land and we have Heritage Land Bank land. And there's two distinctly different processes for those disposals. MOA real estate land is actually fairly simple. You guys have been very supportive of that. You know, the stuff with JJ Brooks, for example, you basically write an ordinance and it authorizes the real estate department or the real estate director to enter into grant negotiations, or I think there's like 4 or 5 different options for how we can dispose of that land. But it's a fairly simple process. HLB land is significantly different. It's much more onerous. But if we talk about housing, we have to also talk about land, just like we have to talk about zoning and we have to talk about infrastructure. It kind of all ties together. HLB has a tremendous amount of land. In all fairness, not all of it's developable. Some of it is maybe developable in the future, but it's probably cost prohibitive right now due to wetlands, maybe easements that run through it. There's a whole host of reasons as to why something maybe isn't developable, topography. But because HLB has so much land, and we want to talk about housing, my hope is that, and again, I don't have a proposal to put forward to you, but we are going to be working on this internally, is finding an easier way to dispose of HLB land, maybe having some sort of carve out saying that this is the process you follow if it's for housing. But Emma, if you could just kind of address how HLB land is disposed of and just kind of the history of how HLB land came to be, I'd really appreciate that.
Sure, thanks, Adam. So I am Emma Gibney. I'm a land management officer for the Heritage Land Bank. Heritage Land Bank, HLB, is a self-supporting non-tax-based agency of the municipality with its own fund and advisory commission. Title 25 of the Anchorage Municipal Code, Public Lands, contains the statutes under which the HLB operates. It is the mission of the Heritage Land Bank to manage uncommitted municipal land and the Heritage Land Bank Fund in a manner designed to benefit present and future residents of Anchorage, promote orderly development, and achieve the goals of the comprehensive plan. HLB achieves its mission by managing an inventory of HLB land and resources to benefit a wide variety of municipal objectives. The HLB manages many types of land in its inventory, over 10,000 acres, which are divided into about 250 parcels, zoned residential, industrial, commercial, recreational, public use, and open space. About half of the HLB inventory is forested lands in the Girdwood Valley, with a small percentage of HLB inventory developed or improved. All proceeds from HLB land sales, leases, and other sources are deposited into the HLB fund. Let me see. The ordinance that created HLB also established the HLB Advisory Commission, HLBAC, which consists of 7 members appointed by the mayor to advise the mayor and assembly regarding the management of land and funds in the HLB portfolio. The commission solicits public comments when it holds public hearings in order to make informed recommendations. Staff handles the ongoing land management responsibilities of the HLB. So more specifically about disposals, exchanges, and transfers. Disposals of HLB inventory can include sales, exchanges, leases, easements, intergovernmental agreements to both the public and private sector, and transfers of parcels to other municipal agencies. The HLB consults with other municipal agencies to determine whether HLB land is needed to fulfill various municipal purposes and the impact of disposal. There are many steps to an Heritage Land Bank disposal. The Heritage Land Bank Advisory Commission holds a public hearing with public notices as specified in code prior to making a recommendation to the mayor and assembly regarding the disposal of Heritage Land Bank parcels. After the public hearing, the advisory commission submits a recommendation to the mayor and assembly stating whether or not a proposed land disposal is in the best interest of the municipality and consistent with the Heritage Land Bank's purpose and mission. The disposal responsibility of the Heritage Land Bank is, at the direction of the mayor and the assembly, to convey from municipal ownership Heritage Land Bank land or interest in land, which is not needed for specific public facilities or purpose. Each disposal shall be in the municipal interest and based at or above appraised fair market value or for other equivalent municipal values or objectives under the procedure specified in section 25.40.25. And so that's a basic overview of how HLB works and functions. It's pretty complicated. If there's any questions, I can try to help answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbonnet. And so are there any questions from members of the committee? Well, and so my question is, how many parcels are you in the process of maybe dispensing or disposing of at this particular time? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Under 10.
Under 10. Okay.
Yeah, that are actively in the process of becoming disposed right now. We have many leases at the moment, but actually disposing, like selling, under 10.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Cross, is your
This is
question?
Jamie. Oh, I apologize.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just had a question. You had talked about transfer and sale. Has HLB and I'm not as adverse or as educated on the history of transferring HLB land as you are, Emma. Has HLB ever transferred land to another department of the MOA for little or no cost if it was deemed to be of a great public need or a public service?
Yes, HLB can transfer land to other municipal agencies that are not, or that are tax-based.
Do you have any examples of where that had occurred so I can kind of wrap my head around it?
I know that Heritage Land Bank land has been transferred into parks. I can't think of another example off the top of my head, but I can figure that out and get back to you.
Oh, that's okay. I appreciate that. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. And Ms. Allard is next, followed by Mr. Constant.
Thanks. Hey, Emma, this is Jamie Allard. I was talking to Adam a little bit ago, and I know that things have been a little bit crazy this last week and a half or so. And I was going to come in and ask you, and I had forgotten to send you an email, but it was in regards to, we have our cemetery that we want to put together out in Eagle River. We already have the spot that we want. What we're trying to avoid doing, somebody just told me, Kevin just said my audio sucks. Pete, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you for the most part.
Okay, thank you. I have
That's
Bluetooth
better.
on.
That's better.
Maybe if okay, I'm not gonna move. All right, so Emma, my question is, since we had that lot across from the high school out in Eagle River on Wolf Den Drive, and one of my concerns is that Girdwood GBOS wants us to come in a $10 million bond. The community is absolutely not about that. We don't bond for things out in Eagle River for the most part at all. And so what I'm wondering is, if we put the cemetery under the Parks and Rec out in Eagle River, and this is a community cemetery, so there's no profiting off of this, how can we work that into getting the purchase of it for some to none for the cemetery out there so that we aren't into that $10 million bond? Can you help me out a little bit?
I'm not familiar with the specifics of that project, or I need to do some research on that. But I am familiar with the project, but it would still need to go through the same process as all of our other disposals, where it goes to the advisory commission, gets approval. It's not, it's not up to me. It's up to the advisory commission, and then ultimately the assembly, you guys. So I'm not really sure how I can help with that, but
well, I'll tell you how
you
can help. So we have our Chugach Eagle River Advisory wants this to happen. We had a committee put together. I'm more than happy to bring it through everybody, but I do need the issue addressed because we are coming up on possibly putting this on a ballot as a $10 million bond. Eagle River wants to be left out of it. We could talk about it on a sidebar to make this
Okay.
happen, but
Yeah.
we really, it's about $1 million, I think that they were saying it was worth, but I just don't want to be, I don't want Chugiak Eagle River on the hook for something that it's a community
Mm.
process, not necessarily a private organization trying to make profit. So I
Yeah.
can send you all the information, and then can we go from there, Emma?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, thank you, Emma. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Constant, followed by Mr. Trombley.
Thank you. Emma, how does HLB keep the lights on, pay the bills?
So we have the HLB fund, and that money comes from the permits, leases, and disposals that that occur. So, and we're not tax funded. We dispose of land to make money to support the upkeep and and everything with HLB.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So the purpose of the sales is to get you to
Mhm.
the point where you can keep the lights on and keep doing the
Yeah.
work of the HLB. Thank you.
Exactly.
Creating cash flow.
Mhm.
Mr. Trombley.
Yeah, I can address Ms. Howard's question about the bonding issue. I believe, I don't remember what meeting this was, but Deputy Municipal Attorney Blair Christensen was at the meeting, and she addressed that specific issue about bonding. And it sounded like to me that that group was actually going to back off that bonding issue because they thought it was just as simple as just, well, we're just going to put it on the ballot. And I think what Blair had done was done a very good job of explaining how bond packages go through a very rigorous process with, we have bond counsel. I think it runs through the CFO, and there's a very intense process which they did not realize actually took place. So it sounded like to me that they were actually backing off of that. In regards to the title, my reason for putting this on there is that I think what I'll do is that when I sit down with Claire and we talk about, the stuff with the builders and we talk about housing in general, we'll kind of have some discussions about HLB land and is there maybe an easier process for housing? Because I kind of have a little bit of heartburn when we want to do housing and it becomes at times almost prohibitive to do it. But we all recognize that we need housing. But when we go to dispose of land for housing, it becomes very, very onerous, very challenging. And so, of course, you never want to cut out the public process. These are public lands, but just trying to find something that says, hey, housing is always a community need. There's never a time that housing is not a community need. I think everybody on the assembly probably agrees with that. And so how can we find something to maybe make the process a little bit easier? That's really my goal.
Okay, great.
That's all,
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. Mr. Salt, followed by Mr. Constant.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. So Adam, question for you. I know, and this is in the Girdwood context. So one of the, I believe, missions of HLB is when you dispose of land is to consider the needs of the community. How do you do that when you dispose of lands, and where does that fit in the priority? If that's something you or Emma want to answer.
Sure, I can address it. Emma can maybe get a little more granular, but there's really when you address the needs of the community, when we say the community, I think it's really important to understand that HLB land belongs to the municipality. It's not just one geographical region. So while there may be an HLB parcel in Chugiak Eagle River, it's not Chugiak in Eagle River's HLB parcel. It belongs to the municipality. So you have to look at it in a completely holistic manner and say, how does the sale or development or non-development of a parcel benefit the entire municipality? So I think that's first. But you also go to your planning documents. And so you say, hey, what do we have any planning documents? The 2040 land use plan, Acres 2020, you said specifically for Girdwood, what is the Crow Creek neighborhood land use plan, the Girdwood area plan? What do they say about development in their communities? And when you go to those plans and you see that, hey, you have a community that's already supported, say, the Crow Creek neighborhood land use plan and says these areas specifically, because I think if I'm correct, Mr. Solt, is that you're talking about the Holton Hills project, is that when you go to the Crow Creek Neighborhood Land Use Plan, it shows that that area is for housing. It is for residential development. And so you go to your guiding documents, and one of the things I've always tried to emphasize is that planning documents are not designed to be developed and then just put on a shelf. They're guiding documents for future assemblies of what happened in the past to provide how should Anchorage develop into the future. That's why we do these things. And so we go to those plans and say, what does it say about these parcels? Oh, it shows that they should be developed for residential development. Okay, how do we free up this land to do that? And so it's a very robust process. We look at holistically the municipality. We look at guiding documents passed by current and previous assemblies. And obviously there's always the public process where you go to community councils as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Salt. Mr. Constant?
Thanks, Adam. I would offer, in your efforts or your planning process to look at streamlining towards housing development. I don't know that I would support going to by right development, but I know that I would consider reduction of preliminary steps before it comes to the assembly. I think that I would be hesitant to step the assembly out of the process. So just as a matter of orientation, that's kind of my baseline, is we can talk about reducing down other steps, but I certainly am not going to be quick to dive onto a project that takes the assembly's voice away.
I completely understand, Mr. Constant. I don't think there's never any intent to eliminate the assembly from any sort of public disposal. I mean, that's absolutely your right to do that. Would never
Like
think
I
about
said,
that.
I would definitely look at those preliminary steps and think about how can we streamline those. That seems like a no-brainer to me, where we can exercise some discretion or allow by right functions. But yeah, there's that final hurdle that should always have representative voice.
Agree. Thank you.
Well, and one of the things that, was mentioned a number of times at the retreat about trying to enhance the number of housing units built in town was, how do we get the planning department or the permit department to yes? And so that's a discussion that is going to be continuing as we go forward. And maybe that's something that Mr. Trombley and Ms. Ross can discuss when they're getting together and looking at those notes from that retreat. Any additional questions or comments about disposing of Heritage Land Bank land? I am not seeing any at this particular time. That was the last item that we had, unless there's some old business that someone would like to bring back up. Any member of the committee with old business? If not, then I guess we will go to audience participation. Are there any members of the audience that would like to participate? If you're calling in to unmute, it's *6 and you will have 3 minutes. I am not seeing any hands go up. I don't hear any voices. Not seeing any audience
Mr.
participation.
Peterson,
Mr. Constant.
I think you had an email today from a member of the public who wanted to participate, but because of the snow day, she couldn't. And so I just want to put a marker on the table for the conversation that she's intending to bring to us, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Thank you. And so there was a landslide up above Chester Creek a couple of months ago now, and she was hoping to bring the question of our kind of water management, how we're addressing storm flows, and our plans as a community for dealing with these issues, because we had a very near miss where an individual was trapped within a room within a building, and had the earth slid just another 8 feet, she probably would have died, and it was a child. And so this conversation is something this member of the public is going to bring to us. And again, she would have been here today, but for the massive snow and the school day.
Right, I remember seeing that email from Ms. Gage. So that will be a future discussion. Any members of the public, last chance to participate? Not seeing or hearing anyone, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion
Thank
adjourned.
you.
All right. Well, thank you. We're adjourned, and with this committee may actually be meeting more often. We've got a number of items on our plate right now, and so it's possible we may actually start meeting a couple times a month. We'll have to see, but we made good progress on today's agenda. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. Have a good afternoon.